When the world remembers Nuremberg, it remembers the courtroom, the judges, the prosecutors, the Nazi leaders sitting in the dock, finally forced to answer for the crimes of the Third Reich. But just a few steps away from that courtroom, another trial was unfolding. Not a legal one, a psychological one. Inside the prison cells of Nuremberg, 2 American mental health experts were given access to the men who had helped orchestrate some of the worst crimes in human history. The experts' names were Dr. Douglas Kelley and Dr. Gustave Gilbert. Kelley was a US Army psychiatrist. His official job was practical: determine whether the Nazi defendants were sane enough to stand trial. Gilbert was a psychologist, fluent in German, who spent long hours with the prisoners as they waited for judgment. Together, they entered a world few people would ever see. The defendants were interviewed, observed, tested, asked to explain themselves. They were given intelligence tests, personality assessments, and the famous Rorschach ink blot test. And what Kelley and Gilbert found was deeply unsettling, because many people expected monsters. They expected madness, obvious insanity, some defect that would make these men different from everyone else. But that is not what Kelley believed he saw. Hermann Goering, Hitler's chosen successor, was charming when he wanted to be. Intelligent, performative, still hungry for control, even in a prison cell. WWII, the former Nazi labor leader, appeared unstable and delusional. Rudolf Hess seemed detached and erratic. Julius Streicher, the venomous publisher of Nazi propaganda, remained consumed by anti-Semitic hatred. Each man had his own patterns, evasions, vanities, and excuses. But Kelley's conclusion was terrifying in its simplicity. Most of them were not insane. They understood what they had done. They had made choices. Gilbert saw something darker and more pathological. He described men like Goering as sadistic, egotistical, and morally diseased. The 2 men disagreed over the meaning of what they had witnessed. Was Nazi evil a kind of sickness, or was it something more ordinary? A capacity inside normal human beings, released by ambition, ideology, obedience, and power? That question haunted the psychologists long after the verdicts were read. Because the most disturbing thing about the Nuremberg defendants was not that they seemed alien, it was that at times they did not. They joked, they complained, they blamed others. They rewrote their own memories to protect themselves from guilt. Some insisted they were only following orders. Some claimed they had known nothing. Some seemed more offended by losing the war than by the millions of lives destroyed under the regime they served. And in those cells, Kelley and Gilbert were not just studying Nazis. They were studying denial. They were studying self-justification. They were studying how human beings can build a moral universe where almost anything becomes permissible. The Nuremberg trials proved that leaders could be held responsible for crimes against humanity. But the psychological work behind the trial left behind an even more uncomfortable warning. Evil does not always arrive looking insane. Sometimes it arrives in a uniform, speaking calmly, rationally, and politely. And sometimes the most frightening question is not, what made them monsters? It is, what allowed ordinary men to become capable of monstrous things?